came to know my spouse through colleagues a year after I joined the company when I was 24, and she was 23. Our bond was instant, and we maintained a cordial relationship with our colleagues throughout our years together. Eventually, we got married and had 2 children. When our kids grew up and left for college, we planned to start a new hobby together. However, before we could finalize our plans, my spouse's lies came to light. After a particularly tough day at work, I returned home late, feeling utterly exhausted. I had been forced to sit through an excruciating budget meeting that had involved a colleague who had a crush on me. She bombarded me with more questions than anyone else, and the way she looked at me made everyone in the room feel uneasy. Despite her advances, I was a devoted husband who cherished my wife deeply and was committed to honoring the vows of marriage. When she came to my office later to ask me out on a date, I politely declined and showed her my wedding ring. She appeared surprised and apologized, stating that she hadn't noticed my wedding ring earlier. She mentioned that she was going through a divorce with someone else in the office. She invited me to call her if I ever wanted to get out of the house for a few hours. Fast forward a few months from that incident, I walked up the stairs to my wife's bedroom as usual, but to my horror, I found her having sex with a man from my office. I let out a loud scream involuntarily, causing my wife to also scream in alarm. The intruder quickly fled from our house without much thought. In a fit of rage, I grabbed a nearby briefcase and hurled it at the intruder, hitting him repeatedly as he struggled to get off my wife. When he finally managed to stand up, I dropped the briefcase and punched him in the face. My wife ran out of the room, and seconds later, she and her adulterous partner drove away, leaving his clothes strewn on the floor. I sat on the ground, struggling to come to terms with what I had just witnessed. My wife returned to the room, tears streaming down her face as she apologized, uncertain of what else to say. What could she say? I had just caught her cheating on me. After a while, I mustered up the courage to stand up, glaring at my soon-to-be ex-wife as she tidied up the bedroom. She appeared to be keeping herself occupied, waiting for me to make a decision. It was ironic how much she seemed to depend on my word, given the situation. I already knew who she was having an affair with and had decided to fire him from his job immediately. It was then that I recalled the man my flirtatious coworker had mentioned as her soon-to-be ex-husband, the same man my wife had cheated on me with. As I struggled to hold back my tears, I asked my wife why she did it. She responded by saying that she didn't know, and that maybe she was becoming bored with our sex life. I told her that wasn't a good enough reason, and that she should have talked to me about how she was feeling or suggested we try something new. If she'd given us the opportunity, we could have worked through it. Unfortunately, as I had feared, it turned out that the affair had been going on for some time without my wife's knowledge. I informed my wife's parents about her infidelity. However, they were unwilling to take her in, so I made the decision to stay in the guest house at my parents' place until I could provide evidence of her adultery in court. When I confided in her about finding her soon-to-be ex with my wife, she revealed that she was divorcing him due to incriminating videos and messages she had discovered on his computer. She gave me copies of the incriminating evidence to use in court against my wife. As my wife moved into a small and unsanitary apartment she could barely afford, her infidelity was exposed during the divorce proceedings. She admitted to feeling constant emotional torment and regret for her actions. However, our adult children and her parents have cut ties with her and refused to speak to or visit her. I'm glad to hear that you have been able to move on and create a new life for yourself and your children after such a difficult experience. It's unfortunate that your ex-wife chose to betray you and break her marriage vows out of boredom, but you have shown wisdom and strength in how you handled the situation. It's important to remember that we can learn and grow from life's challenges, and it seems like you have done just that. She was well aware of what she was doing, and you most likely did the best thing you could have done by divorcing her so you could move on with your life. Although your children were adults, it's apparent that what she did affected them as well. Thank goodness you've all managed to create a new normal and live a happy life. I wish you all the best of luck and good fortune. Chinoids, now for today's second story. My wife was 35, and I was 36 when she was informed of an upcoming high school reunion. We arranged for a babysitter for that night and immediately started looking forward to it. Although I didn't know anyone, I was excited to meet my wife's old friends at her upcoming high school reunion. Our love story began one night at a bar on the same street where we both worked. She was a hairdresser and I worked at a print shop. I was immediately drawn to her beautiful hair and captivating eyes and knew she would be someone special in my life. She actually first spoke to me by commenting that I needed a haircut, but that's beside the point. We got married and had 2 children. Together, our marriage had its imperfections, and there were a few instances when we thought about taking some time apart. However, whenever it came down to actually packing a bag, neither of us could bring ourselves to do it. There was no infidelity involved, so it always seemed possible to work through any disagreements or issues. After all, isn't that how a marriage is supposed to function? Our children had a happy childhood and were spared any loud arguments. When we started planning to attend her high school reunion, they were 13 and 16 years old. 2 weeks prior to the event, my wife added many of her high school friends on Facebook. More than one of these were men, but most of them were married as well. I didn't have any suspicions until I started hearing her phone notifications going off multiple times while we were both at home. It seemed like I could hear it even when I was in the shower or using the toilet. It continued while she was cooking, and it was becoming increasingly obvious. She knew it too. Funnily, I asked her who was messaging her so frequently, and she claimed it was just her high school friends talking about the upcoming reunion. I understand. So she switched her phone to vibrate, and it appeared that the messages had stopped after she fell asleep. One night, however, I heard her phone vibrate again. I tried to ignore it, but after 30 minutes, I couldn't resist checking it. What I read was unsettling. The messages were between her and a man who would also be attending the high school reunion. In one message, she expressed excitement at the prospect of seeing him again, while in another, she inquired about whether he had experienced anything as fun as what they did when they were younger. He replied that he had never had that level of fun with anyone else. She responded by suggesting that they might have fun at the reunion or even after it. He then pointed out that this sounded like she wanted to keep seeing him beyond the reunion, and she didn't deny it. When I confronted her about it, she apologized profusely and said that he seemed lonely and needed friends. I told her that this was no excuse to talk about having fun or continuing to see each other after the reunion. When I asked if they had been intimate in the past, she denied it, but now I have my doubts. Despite this, I still agreed to go to the reunion with her, thinking that she hadn't betrayed my trust yet and that I would keep an eye on her. However, little did I know that she continued to communicate with the man, maybe even more than before. On the night of the reunion, she got her hair and nails done, and I noticed the man took a few minutes to gather the courage to reintroduce himself to my wife while I was standing next to her. I despised the feeling that man gave me. He had a hard time looking at me and seemed desperate to connect with my wife. She also looked at him with some affection, but with more consideration for me. She introduced me kindly, but he didn't seem to care. He sat next to her, and they drank all night while I remained sober. My wife was visibly drunk by the time I had to go to the bathroom. I told her I'd be back soon. When I returned, she and the man were nowhere to be found. I searched around and asked one of the women from the reunion about their whereabouts. The woman I asked about my wife's whereabouts said they had gone outside for a cigarette. Although my wife didn't smoke, I assumed she was just keeping the man company. However, when I went outside, they were nowhere to be found. I searched the parking lot, checked inside all the cars, and called her cell phone, but she didn't answer. I was puzzled and angry. I waited for 45 minutes before finally receiving a text from her. The text said that she had agreed to go with the man to a gas station down the road, but he was planning to drop her off at her house since it was nearby. I knew this was a lie. I got home 10 minutes later and found that the babysitter had left and our kids were already asleep. My wife was passed out on the couch, wearing only her panties. I woke her up right away and demanded an explanation. She was barely coherent, but a part of me suspected that she was faking it. She claimed that the man gave her a ride home because he needed someone to talk to about some issues he was going through. But trying to get any more information out of her in that state was impossible. I decided to wait until the morning to talk to my wife when she was more sober. Our teenagers informed me about their night with the babysitter, but I was distracted and couldn't concentrate. At least I knew they were asleep when she arrived home and didn't notice anything strange. When my wife woke up, I questioned her about what had happened. She complained about her memory being hazy and expressed regret for leaving me alone and getting too drunk. However, a few hours later, she finally broke down and revealed that she had just recalled what had truly transpired. She may have anticipated that I would find out eventually. She confessed that the man invited her outside to talk, and she accepted. Since it was cold, he suggested they go into his car, and she agreed without suspecting anything wrong. Then she claimed that he forced himself on her, kissing and having sex with her against her will. She was weeping, but I suspected it was due to being caught. I demanded to check her phone, but she initially resisted and made excuses. Eventually, I took it from her and locked myself in the bathroom. It turned out that she had enough time to text the man and tell him that what they had done was a mistake. However, even before the incident, there were messages exchanged days before the reunion, which indicated that they had a plan to sneak away, have sexual intercourse, and even discuss the possibility of her spending the night at his place. This was the final straw. Our marriage was over. When I came out of the bathroom, she looked petrified and was staring at me as if her life depended on it. I told her that it was the end of our relationship and that I couldn't be with her anymore. Despite knowing that she had planned and cheated on me, she sobbed and almost inaudibly pleaded for my forgiveness. I confronted her about the pre-planned messages that proved she intended to cheat on me despite being faithful all these years. I couldn't find it in myself to continue protecting her as my wife after she willingly invited another man into our marriage. It seemed like she couldn't feel any worse, but she did it. She curled up into a ball and cried uncontrollably. Despite my anger and disappointment, I still did her a few favors. I arranged for our kids to have a sleepover at their friend's house so that they wouldn't be traumatized by the situation later in life. I gathered my wife's clothes and personal belongings and packed them. Then, I called her parents and explained the situation to them, suggesting that they come and take their daughter with them. They arrived and attempted to talk to me and apologize, but I only greeted and parted with them briefly. Meanwhile, my wife made several attempts to leave the car, but her parents warned her that if she refused to go with them, they wouldn't allow her to stay with them until she found another place to live. Eventually, they managed to get her into the car with her things, and they drove off. The news she received paralyzed her. She was aware that her life would never be the same again. She remained motionless like a statue as her parents drove her away through the legal proceedings of divorce and custody battles. Her tears were silent but constant. Our teenagers decided to stay with me, and we continued living in the same house and attending the same school. Her mother had the decency to confess her mistake and try to make amends as best as she could. As years went by, we became friends, but I am grateful every day that I didn't stay with her and attempt to reconcile. It could have been much worse if I had stayed with her. I made the choice to leave, and she didn't like it, but perhaps that was what she deserved. She's moved out of her parents' house several times since then, but still hasn't found happiness after the end of our family life. Meanwhile, I got remarried to a faithful and wonderful woman a year ago. I wanted to share my story to offer hope to others going through a similarly difficult and life-altering situation. During my reaction, your story will certainly spread hope that anyone can find a future for themselves beyond what they've known. Unfamiliar doesn't have to be intimidating. We're only human after all, and wouldn't have to face anything we aren't strong enough for. That being said, I'm sorry that you've experienced this betrayal. Even when reality sank in, you stuck with the decision you needed to make for yourself. It can be incredibly challenging to look beyond our emotions and what we're accustomed to. However, when someone violates our trust like this, starting over may be the only choice. Seek support and guidance from loved ones and professionals. And remember that there is always a way to keep moving forward. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you and your children nothing but the best. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.